Kristina, welcome to the Couply Relationship Advice Podcast.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's
Thank
very
you.
nice to be here.
It is amazing to have you here, and I'm really excited to record this episode together.
Me too. Me too. Always lots to talk about when it comes to relationships. So,
And today we're going to be exploring the 5 top relationship issues that you see in couples therapy.
yes.
If it's cool, I would love if you could tell the Couply community a little bit more about yourself and how you got into this space.
Sure. It is not a very linear story. Like, I wasn't really one of those people that knew what I wanted to do from a young age or anything like that. So this is actually my second career. I started in journalism.
Whoa.
Yeah. So I got my master's degree in that. I went into that. I started in documentary films.
Wow.
So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I was working on a documentary at the time about prescription drug abuse. So it was quite a heavy topic, obviously. And there was a lot of mental health components to it. Yeah. And then it was kind of funny because with documentaries, you do a lot of interviews with people that are pretty long and you get to know them pretty well because you hear their stories and all these things. And I found that people found it pretty therapeutic to tell their story. But then what was really strange with journalism is that you hear the story and then you go home and that's that. You never talk to these people again. Yeah. And so I kind of would think about like, oh, I hope they're okay. And I hope they're getting the support that they need and all these things. And people seem to open up to me quite well. And then I thought maybe it would be a little bit rewarding to stay with the person to help them through the thing that they just told me about rather than kind of dipping. So I went back to school. That was a very tough time of like identity crisis and, you know, should I change careers and all these things? But I did. I'm really, really happy that I did. And I started a private practice called Fresh Insight in 2018 and it was just me. And I'm happy to say that it's grown and it's been doing well. So now we have some people on the team and other therapists and an intake coordinator and all these things I never expected would happen. So I'm very, very happy with it.
That's awesome. And it must have been hard going back to school because journalism, documentaries, that's like a really tough career to crack into.
Yes. And it's so true because right when I became a journalist was when journalism was changing a lot. Like everybody could become a journalist in some capacity because we had smartphones and all these things. So it was such a weird time to be a journalist. And I thought, I don't really know if this has much of a future either, you know? So you have a certain plan and then you got to deviate from the plan. But again, I think these things really work out because I've never regretted that decision once. And it's so cool to be able to talk to you now about relationships and all these things, you know?
And you also have a pretty large following too.
Yes, which is also very strange. That happened weirdly because I made one TikTok as a joke kind of, and then it happened to go viral. I don't really know why. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll just keep doing this because maybe people really like mental health content. And that's been really neat because I think people are really hungry to learn more about relationships or themselves or mental health or whatever it happens to be. So it's kind of the opposite of journalism. It's like this is a really good time in some ways to be in the therapy space because I think people are quite interested in the content. Not everybody, but some people.
They definitely are.
Yeah.
So let's get into the top 5 relationship issues that you see the most in couples therapy. And the number 1 here is partners not listening to the other's complaints until it's too late.
Yes. This is by far, you know, I read the statistic once that said that couples wait 6 years before going to therapy. And that surprised me, but then it didn't when I thought about it in a way, because a lot of people will come in where there's been problems for a really, really long time. But what happens, and I'm not going to lie, don't shoot the messenger, but mostly it's men not realizing in a heterosexual partnership that their wife is unhappy or their girlfriend or whatever. And it's interesting because when you hear their story, you'll hear things like the wife say, oh no, well, I asked about couples therapy 5 years ago. Or, you know, last year I was actually staying at my parents' house because I was so miserable. And so I'm sort of sitting there thinking, what was missed there, you know? But I think a lot of us can maybe start to take advantage of our partner or think that just because we're married that, okay, well, we'll just stay married because people don't get divorced, or you don't think that it's going to happen to you. But then meanwhile, your partner is hurting quite a bit. And I think all of those times where we might brush our partner off, even if we think it's small, those things can really, really accumulate, you know, because it doesn't necessarily have to be something big like an affair that causes a situation like that. It can just be a buildup of those small hurts over a long period of time.
Yeah, and this was definitely the case for myself. I think I was in that category where by the time that me and my ex went to couples therapy, it was really way too far down the line, I think, to really have an impact. And I think sometimes people go to couples therapy thinking it's going to be this act of God.
Oh my gosh, you're telling me, man. Yeah, totally. I'm sitting there like, because that, I think that's why a lot of therapists don't really like couples therapy, because sometimes people come in with so much urgency and pain, and they're like, fix us right now. And you're like, man, I'm kind of working with 10 years of traumatic incidents between the two of you. So yeah.
And I think there's something else really interesting that I was looking at the other day, and it was around men and women's differences in communication, specifically around expressing complaint and how women are much more attuned to indirect complaint, because in female social circles, indirect complaint is sort of the way that the pecking order is established. This could be the ways that females look at each other when one leaves the room, or the ways that they speak to you. And it's just much more refined, almost like a ninja in terms of social skills.
Yeah.
And men are a little bit more dumb animals, will have bust-ups, but able to get over them much, much faster. And it makes me think like, wow, men are just much less attuned to these subtle complaints, when if things are actually wrong, you need to have a somber conversation and say, hey, I'm really unhappy and I think we need to address this. It's not going to come across in these small sort of like, well, we're arguing a lot, so maybe we should get a couples therapist. Like, no, you need to sit down and actually have a real conversation.
That's so fascinating what you were just talking about too. Yeah. And I think a lot of family of origin stuff can play into this as well, because, for example, if you're somebody who learned from your family that you actually just don't talk about things, like you actually see that quite a bit, unfortunately. And maybe somebody's family dealt with things by literally just brushing them under the rug, and so they didn't really gain any knowledge that repair even needs to happen or how to do it. And so then now they're in a relationship, and maybe they do see that their partner's unhappy, but they just do what they've always done, which is brushing it under the rug, because that's actually very normal to them, right? And so I don't always think it's malicious that people are missing their partner's cues. It can be quite complicated sometimes.
And then they come to see a couples therapist, and like you say, you've got 10 years of baggage to get through in a single hour. Good fucking luck.
I know. And sometimes I really hope that this will shift over time, because I think this leads to my second point, actually, of the common relationship issues, is people going to couples therapy too late. Because I always say to people, if you're starting to see some recurring themes and you're starting to feel stuck, that's the time to go to a couples therapist. I think right now it's this idea that people think you have to be really on the rocks to go to therapy, and that's why it's really hard to do anything at that point sometimes. Or I think with couples therapy, it's a situation with being in a relationship. Sometimes I think of, you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. So if you don't even know, for example, like we were talking about what repair is, how are you supposed to bring that into your relationship? Because I think a lot of couples will say, well, we can handle this ourselves, we don't need an outsider. But you don't know what you don't know. So somebody on the outside can say, well, this is how you like give an effective apology, because we don't even know that, right? And I don't necessarily think that's anybody's fault. We don't have classes at school about this, unfortunately, even though I wish we did. So yeah, I think that's another thing, is just people delaying going to therapy.
What are some of the signs that you think couples should be looking out for to be like, okay, it's time to go and see a couples therapist. Let's go and get some professional coaching and help.
Like I mentioned, one is the repetitive nature of these things, in my opinion. So if you're having the same arguments or the same patterns are happening, something's going on there that hasn't really been addressed. I also think if you're starting to bring things up to your partner and it does seem like they don't really care as much anymore, that's a sign, you know, because at the beginning, I find that you'll bring something up and your partner hopefully is a little bit more responsive and takes it more seriously. But then sometimes when you fall into those typical patterns, somebody can be like, well, here we go again. This is just what we do. So I'm just going to check out of this. But that is really the time to engage and say, well, why do we keep having this problem, and what can we do differently?
Yeah, that's good. And then that's the point when it's like, hey, this is repetitive. We're going through this same stuff.
Yeah.
We're creating maybe a toxic dynamic.
Right.
It's time for us to, let's get an extra person here to help us unpick this and start solving things.
Yeah, because it's really interesting. Back to that idea of you don't know what you don't know. Sometimes I'll even try to, and it's always from a place of care. It's not from a place of me trying to be critical, but you might even have a tone that you don't realize is actually really driving a conflict. So, I've said to people, are you aware you actually sound kind of condescending when you talk in that way? And they might not have any clue. And in reality, that condescending tone is the thing that's pissing their partner off, right? But if somebody doesn't tell you that, and then if your partner tells you, you might be like, oh, they just complain about everything, But so there's a lot of things that you can gain from just an impartial person, just watching your dynamic. It's a very brave thing to go to couples therapy if you think about it like that. But
it is. No one wants to be criticized, and no one wants to be made feel like they're in the wrong.
Yeah.
So, but it's at the same time, being open to feedback, especially from an expert, is a very powerful thing as well.
Mm-hmm. And as a therapist, you're always kind of walking that tightrope between holding people accountable, but making sure that they feel comfortable with you and not criticized. It's a really funny line to walk, It's tough sometimes.
This is where all of the science needs to meet the art.
Yes, exactly. Yes, totally.
The other one that you have here is me thinking versus we thinking.
Yes. And I'm curious just about your thought, because I feel like this could be a whole podcast episode in itself.
Great.
But sometimes I just worry that we're all becoming a little entitled.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us in Canada, at least for the most part, are quite comfortable in terms of our basic needs being met. Now we can all have a platform to share our every thought or every feeling, and people can respond to it, which is a good ego stroke of I'm so important. Everybody needs to listen to what I have to say. I just sometimes wonder as well if I think a lot of stuff with mental health that's supposed to be for self-care can also get really unhealthy. So for example, like boundaries is a big one. I see that people will try to learn how to have healthy boundaries, but then they end up going to extreme of they're just causing fights with everybody in the spirit of setting boundaries in quotation marks. It's like, that's actually not healthy either. We don't want to go around always being like, well, you hurt my feelings and I'm the most important person on the planet and you need to apologize to me. It's like, well, no, relationships are about two people affecting the dynamic. So I am seeing that where I'm sort of having to sometimes like rein people in the other way of it's gone from self-care to self-entitlement, and in the relational context, it can go to a place of, well, I'm unhappy, you're not meeting my needs, I need you to do X, Y, Z. But if both people have that energy, then you get gridlocked because it's like, well, until he does this or until she does this, I'm not going to change my behaviors. And
that becomes, and then you're almost touching that sort of zero-sum games that you see in unhealthy relationships when people are constantly keeping score. And it's weird when you see this in couples. I feel very lucky I don't have this in my relationship, or not a sniff of that. But you definitely see it and you're like, that must be exhausting.
Oh my gosh, I know. And I think sometimes we can really cling to that idea of things should be 50-50 all the time. And I think understandably a lot of women have that comes from a place of protectiveness, because I think a lot of women can be taken advantage of in the realm of home care, childcare, all these things, right? So I think
mental load.
A lot of us have these defense mechanisms, and sometimes I catch myself gravitating there, but nothing's going to be 50-50 all the time. You're going to go through ebbs and flows where sometimes you're going to be the one who has to carry the burden of things. Sometimes your partner's going to have to do it, but you have to have faith that they're going to do it. And then you also have to do it from that place of generosity because you want to, and sort of like that. It sounds so simple, but that do unto others as you would have done unto you, I think we kind of forget sometimes. So then you get really gridlocked, and it's really hard to inspire any change if they're like, well, I don't want to because he didn't. And I always say to people, like, obviously there's a line, but you do sometimes just have to eat shit in a relationship. like sometimes, and okay, like, don't take this to the extreme. I know there's all these listeners that are like, well, if he does X, Y, Z, I shouldn't. Okay, but I'm talking about things where sometimes your partner will be upset and you might not even get it. That I've been there where I'm like, I don't get it. But it's like, okay, it mattered to him.
Yeah.
And that's what's important. He had an experience, and so I need to apologize, even though I might not understand or agree.
Yeah.
It's like he was hurt. The end, you know? Do I want to focus on why he's wrong, or do I want to just have a healthy relationship where he feels cared for?
Yeah.
Right? Like, or people will be like, oh, I don't really care about what they're talking about, so how do I? It's like, do you care about what your partner talks about 100% of the time? Absolutely not. But sometimes you're like, okay, yes, I will pretend I care about X, Y, Z because it's important to you.
And sometimes they know that you don't really care,
Right.
but they are very appreciative.
Exactly. Yes. If I come home with a makeup palette or something, my partner, bless his heart, pretends to give a shit. And I'm like, that is so nice.
Yeah.
I know you don't care at all. But, you know, these are the little moments of, you know, like I said, eating little shit that you just have to sometimes do in a relationship. I don't know.
I think we need to make that thing. Eating little shits, just little ones.
You know, every now and again.
Yeah.
This is the we thinking I'm talking about. It's not always about you. It's not always about, well, I'm bored, so I don't want to hear that story or whatever. It's like, if you don't care about any of those things, then be single.
I always think about how relationships are just made and broken in the tiny moments of connection.
100%. Yeah.
And that's something I just think about so much. And when you start to see life like that, or you see a relationship like that, it really changes the way that you connect with everyone.
Yes, totally. There's this interesting statistic. Don't know where it came from off the top of my head, but it says you have to have 5 positives to every 1 negative.
Yeah.
Sometimes men really like hearing that because they're like, there's a formula there,
Yes.
right? But it's interesting if you think about that with the relationship, like you said, if you have one little negative moment of a little micro hurt, but it's not addressed in any way or it's not balanced out, then you're going to start feeling unhappy and wonder why.
The Gottmans did the really big study on this one. So it was a 20-year study where they looked into this, and what they saw was that happy couples that didn't get divorced, responded to their partner's little mini bits of connection,
Yes.
the story, the makeup palette, the thing they got upset about, the high score in the video game.
Oh, yeah.
They responded to it positively.
Yeah.
And that was the one thing that was the biggest predictor in couples staying married. And then the other way is there's 2 other options. You can ignore it, which is sort of like a neutral way, where you don't really engage, like, okay, darling, yes, dear.
Yes.
Or you can respond negatively. And the way that we always visualize it in Couply is we say, look, your relationship is like a ship. Here's the hull. It's underneath the water. These are all the little moments that keep your ship waterproof. But when you push out one of those bolts of connection, guess what? You've got a hole now underneath the waterline, and that is letting in a little bit of water. So you need to make sure that you're keeping that hole watertight.
Love that. Yeah, it's so true. And it's so interesting. Like, if you've ever been on the receiving end of somebody not responding or rejecting,
negatively.
it's very painful, actually. It sounds so silly. Like, but when you're excited about something and it's just not mirrored in any capacity, it can feel like a little rejection, you know?
Oh, it feels like a big rejection.
Yeah.
Especially when I see it in relationships, because you think like, oh no, your whole life you might have things that you find interesting. People change.
Right.
We have different hobbies or different passions or things that we just get really into, and you might never be able to share any of them with your partner.
Yeah.
And although these are like small things, you think, oh, well, that's what life is. It really adds up.
Right. And I think about, you know, how a relationship can disintegrate even with just that what you talked about, because let's say your partner never responds to your bid, then you might go to a place of, well, I'm not even going to tell them about this thing I'm excited about.
Yeah.
Right. So now, like, it's so funny. That's a really small thing we're talking about in some capacity, but it can lead to that disconnection.
Yeah.
Now you're not really a part of each other's worlds as much.
Oh.
You know, it's so interesting.
That little part of the world, the thing that you're excited about, you speak to someone else about it, their eyes light up, they're listening.
Yeah, totally.
And that little part of your world that should be with your partner is now gone, and you're talking about it with your friends instead. Exactly. Or you're feeling like, oh, I want to hang out with my buddy because they always listen or have banter about this thing, or at least they'll try and get it.
Yeah, totally. So, you know, coming back to that we thinking, it's how does my behavior impact my partner? What do they need? What do I need to do to make them feel good? Because it's really easy to just get so focused on yourself.
So it's okay to eat small amounts of shit in a relationship.
Yeah. So I don't know how you'd be able to stay in a relationship for a long time if you didn't do that. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's like you sometimes have to watch the movie you don't want to watch, but
Yeah.
you know, it's part of it. Like,
Yeah.
but again, this is sort of where, again, this could be a whole podcast episode, but if all of us are so used to being comfortable also all the time, it's like, well, I don't deserve to be uncomfortable for 2 hours. Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
a human being on the planet who doesn't
Yeah.
always have comfortable experiences that go your way.
Yeah.
So
I love that. I think that's a really good thing to keep in mind, is that, hey, some things are going to be uncomfortable, some things are going to be annoying, and that is part of the relationship.
yeah, I remember when I was in therapy and in my 20s, like individual therapy, and my therapist would always tell me, you are not the center of the universe and you are not perfect. And I remember I'd be so pissed sometimes.
Yeah.
What a mean thing to say, but it's true. Like sometimes we just need those reminders.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Okay. And not being intentional or putting the work into the relationship.
Yes, yes. So I don't know. I think that at least in Canada, at least with a lot of the people that I work with, I feel like there's this timeline that everybody has in their head about,
yeah.
I just have to be married at this age.
Yes.
You know, and it's really sociologically reinforced. And then all their friends are getting married. And so they think they have to do it. But I think that there's this idea that once I'm married or once I'm in the relationship, the end. I'm done. I got my partner, right?
Oh boy. Yeah.
But it's like the polar opposite. I've heard it with people with weight loss journeys where some of them will say it's the losing weight is the easiest part. It's the maintaining the weight loss that's the hardest.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same with relationships. Once you're in it, you know, that the daily things of those moments of connection, responding to the bids, the date nights, asking your partner, how was your day? Like there's really small things that you need to keep doing. But it's this idea, well, now I'm in the relationship and it's all good.
Yeah, we're good. We're married now. That's it.
Yeah,
We're stuck
totally.
with each other.
Yes. Yeah. And all these tropes about marriage too, of like, you know, I'm stuck with the old ball and chain.
Oh,
And
I hate that.
me too. There's so many gross ideas
Yeah.
about marriage out there of like, well, you're just unhappy. And what is this?
Well, the wife was always right.
Yeah. Totally. All of these negative things. And it's like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I do think it's about, like you said, responding to those moments when your partner is upset, having like an actual conversation about what happened, or going to couples therapy, or doing the fun things together.
You know, one of the things that I fucking love about Couply and the community is that we do these community questions now. So brand new thing.
Oh, fun.
And so each week or each day we'll ask a poll or a question, something like, what's something that your partner has done for you recently? And so many people write down, we can read all the comments, they're like in the community tab, but so many people are write down, say like, oh, it was, he was giving me kisses before he left, even though I was half asleep. He was just whispering in my ear like, I love you, and gave me a little kiss.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
She always puts the coffee on before she goes to work in the morning.
Yeah.
And it is these tiny, frequent things.
Yes.
But it is also just honoring that beauty in the relationship of doing this shit for your partner,
Yeah.
or them doing things for you and recognizing them. And what I think makes me so excited is that this is a community that is like, yeah, we're going to carry on doing the work. We're going to make our relationships work. And I think just that flip, if you can flip that switch in your mind that just because we're married, it means that we're together forever. Mm-hmm. Guess what? 43% of marriages end in divorce.
Totally. Yeah.
This is not the case, guys. This is not the case at all. Just because you're married, it now means that the work continues exactly the same rate, and you're still building this culture together. You're still creating your behavioral norms together.
Yeah.
But it's beautiful. You should be, and if you're consciously creating it, it can be so beautiful because you really have a partner who is hopefully listening.
Yeah.
They want to create it with you,
Yeah.
and that can give you a really magical journey through the good parts of your life.
It's so true, because I often think to myself that life is hard enough as it is.
So
There's
hard.
So much going on in the world right now, and I truly cannot imagine what it would be like to have to live in a difficult world and have to live with a partner where you're not getting along.
Oh God.
You know, like being able to turn to your partner as your safe haven and your support and your friend is so important, especially now. You know, even like I'm thinking during COVID, right? When
Yeah.
we were stuck at home with our partners, and for those of us who were in a good place at that time, thank the Lord above. But I know there were a lot of people too where it highlighted a lot of the problems in their relationships. And this is where I think it comes back to that we thinking, because, you know, the more that you nurture that relationship, the more you get the benefits of it. Because living with somebody who's happy and wants to connect with you and spend time with you feels so good. But if you aren't contributing to the goodness of your relationship, you then have to sit in a space where there's tension and unhappiness and heaviness, and that just doesn't feel good, right? So I always kind of try to tell people it's in your best interest to nurture your relationship, you know?
100%. I love that. Lacking a particular relational skill.
Yes. So I kind of talked before about how we don't have any classes about this stuff, and you don't know what you don't know.
Yes.
It's so funny because I almost am like, I wish everybody could become a therapist, because then you have to learn. So it's such simple things, like even love languages. How helpful is that when you start to learn, oh, well, maybe my partner actually doesn't respond to gifts, but they respond to quality time. That's a skill that you can learn. And that's why I like your app so much, right? Because it's like, these are the skills you can actually implement. So there's communication skills. I love Gottman because it's basically all skill based, right? But these tiny little tweaks, like for example, I was in a session the other day with a couple, and something I noticed with a lot of women is going on these soliloquies about being unhappy, right? So it's like 5 minutes of content
In one go.
Well, yes, but like, you know, in couples therapy, I'll interrupt to say this is really hard to digest when you have all of this coming out at once. Like your pain is valid, your anger is valid, but it makes it maybe hard for your partner to hear. So I talk about XYZ statements, for example. It's like when you do X in this situation, which is the Y, I feel Z, you know? So it's a tight little sentence, and it makes it more specific, right? It's not about the person's character anymore. It's like, well, you're just a dick. It's like, well, when you don't turn the kettle on in the morning or whatever, then I feel blah, blah, blah. So it's specific, you know?
Christina, I have a question.
Yeah.
Like, we often talk about these sort of small things like dishes, kettle, all of this stuff. But clinically, is it the small things, or is it bigger issues that people typically get rubbed up the wrong way about?
Such a good question. You know what I think it is? I actually think that the small issues then become bigger issues. So for example, let's take dishes, right? A lot of people have problems with chores. It's unbelievable. But what happens is that it's no longer about, okay, well, you don't do the dishes. It's, I've asked you to do the dishes and you haven't listened to me. So now I feel like you don't respect me. So now we're not talking about dishes anymore. We're talking about a perceived lack of respect in the relationship. Now you think that your partner doesn't respect you. That's a problem, right? So it can actually become a character thing that happens. Or for example, if you perceive your partner, let's say your partner said that they were going to get the groceries and they didn't, but that happens over and over and over. Well, now it becomes that your partner's unreliable.
Right.
So now we are talking about a bigger issue because there's a breach of trust in the area of reliability. So it's interesting because I think it's just a case of, if those small things are not tended to properly, it can become a big thing.
Oh yeah,
you
you
know?
Got water now in the bottom of your boat. It's starting to sink.
Totally.
You're looking down the hatch and you see it filled with water. And I'm like, wait a second, this is wrong. I shouldn't be on this ship. What am I doing?
Exactly.
Time
and
to
I
get
don't
off.
trust you as a captain anymore. You know, it like spirals. So
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so to answer that though, it does seem like majority of the time it is these more repetitive micro problems versus like larger things that sort of go wrong, and less about the bigger blowouts.
Yes.
And more about the constant small things.
Now, there are situations where people might do okay day to day, but then they do have these big blowouts that are, you know, horrific. So that's like a different type of couple, I would say. But that, I mean, in some ways you could say that those isolated arguments can still become this bigger issue, because again, if you're speaking to me in that way, that also tells me you don't respect me, right? So yeah, I think it can be a combination, but I do think we underestimate just those micro moments and how much they matter.
Interesting. Very, very, very cool. And I want us to get back onto the lacking particular relationship skills, communication skills here. I love to think about how different people communicate. I think I spoke to you about the color wheel test. It's one by Dr. Taylor Hartman.
Oh, yeah.
It is, for me, has changed everything in the way that I work, the way that I talk to different people. And it categorized people into 4 different colors. Red people being very dominant and assertive, motivated by power. The blues being more detail driven and really more around specifics, but also very much so about building culture in their relationship. So they love to be organized, they love to do events, but these things are very planned and they can go down an absolute rabbit hole of what ifs. Then you have the yellow personality type, who's very creative, charismatic, a little bit of chaos, but always down for an adventure, especially a last minute adventure.
Yeah.
And then the white personality type is motivated by peace. They are calm. They are happy to be a wallflower. They enjoy just listening to conversations, don't speak as much as the other colors, but also are very, 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 very stubborn deep down.
Yeah.
But seeing how different people communicate for me has been so interesting using that model, because you're able to quickly see what someone's primary kind of communication style is.
Fascinating.
And then see the obvious things that each other are going to get upset about.
Yeah, totally.
So reds and yellows get very offended because yellows are really around connection and charisma. So they're quite thoughtful in the way that they speak and they want everyone to feel included and welcomed. Whereas reds don't give a shit. They're going to give it to you straight. They are blunt and they're moving forward and they don't care who's in the way. And I think that is something that has been very, very powerful for myself, moving through and trying to understand how I communicate, but then respecting how other people choose to communicate too.
Right.
Because this is just your personality type.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is how you communicate. And obviously for the reds, they need to learn in certain ways how to be softer. They've got to think about how to tone things down, especially if they're dealing with someone who is a little bit more reserved or perhaps introverted or just generally a little more meek in their outlook. For them, it can be so powerful if they can use their power and their bluntness to open a door for someone.
Yeah. And you know, it comes back to this idea of you don't know what you don't know, because I didn't know about that until you told me about that. But how helpful is that? So now it's like, wow, I can even introduce that to couples now. But like, if none of us have any space to learn these things, then we might be missing the mark and not knowing why, or that's such a helpful, simple tool to bring into your relationship, you know?
I've got a few backup questions here. One of the ones that you have spoken about is this is just who I am mentality. What's wrong with that?
Oh, yes, that is one of my pet peeves and like a red flag in couples therapy, because for me, I think two qualities that are so helpful in a relationship are receptivity and openness. You know, so if somebody says something to you, you don't just say, well, you know, this is just who I am, because when you're saying that, you're saying, I don't really care that you just said that. I mean, you know, that's what you're communicating. And B, I'm not actually interested in taking accountability or changing my behavior. So it basically this is now a you problem because I'm not changing, right? What is somebody supposed to do with that? If you say, you know, it really actually hurts my feelings when you interrupt me when I'm talking, well, this is just who I am. That is like literally the conversation can go nowhere anymore, you know? So I think the more receptive you can be of just saying, oh, you know, why do you feel that way? Like, just bring some curiosity into the mix. That's something I think as a therapist, I've learned that everybody can benefit from, is just being radically curious about why somebody says something, you know?
I've seen it as well in this is my culture.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Like, this is just my culture.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm from X culture and we are blunt. We don't care about feelings, or we are ultra masculine. Or we believe that women need to act in a certain way. I've seen all of the above.
Yes. Yeah. And that's really tough, because again, it's really hard to work with that as a part. It's really hard to work with that as a therapist too, because it's like, well, then why are you really here if you're just going to say this is how you are? You know?
And especially given that you're sort of in a position where you're like, hey, I actually know what I'm talking about.
Right.
I'm the fucking expert here. Right. I'm giving you some feedback.
Right. And yeah, it's just like closed-mindedness, just no interest. And I think it's really painful and aggravating to be on the receiving end of that as a partner.
There was some good research around this, around men specifically. And it was, if men allow themselves to be influenced, it was like a leading key indicator of marriage success. So if men did not allow themselves to be influenced by their partner for decisions, 69% of them got divorced within like a few years. Yeah,
it does not surprise me at all. Because again, talking about what you were asking before, it's like, okay, that might be a small issue, but if the take away from your partner is we're not a team at all. That's the bigger issue now.
Yeah.
I never feel like a teammate to you, and I don't feel like you care about my opinion.
Yeah.
Like, oof, that's rough.
Yeah.
Right?
What are some of the things that happy couples do?
Oh, what a good question. I think, like we were saying, there's all these moments of connection with happy couples and responsiveness. I also think when it's not that happy couples don't argue. I think when they do, it's from a place of what are we going to learn from this experience, and okay, what can I do differently, and how can I actually act on that?
Yeah.
So there's more intentionality, like I guess we were talking about, more micro moments of connection. I think they just enjoy each other's company more because they have fun.
Yeah.
You know, which sounds so simple, but we maybe don't really think about, even as individuals in today's day and age. Like, do you have something that brings you joy?
Yeah.
Do you do things that are fun? And, you know, I actually find it so heartwarming when I'll see TikToks of couples that are just doing like the funniest shit together. And I'm like, that looks so fun. You know, it just seems like a good vibe. So bringing fun into your relationship, bringing responsiveness, these micro moments of connection. In some ways, it's like not complicated to be in a happy relationship if you think about it. We just have to be intentional and mindful of it.
Amazing. And then finally, this is a bit of a technical one, but you've spoken a little bit about people's ability to overregulate emotions.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah, this is just my sort of theory. I don't know if there's any science on it or anything, but you know, it's the person. Well, I guess Gottman did look at this. It's sort of the person who stonewalls. So what stonewalling is somebody who is actually feeling a lot on the inside and they're completely dysregulated, but on the outside you wouldn't really see anything. And they found that the vast majority of stonewallers are men. But I think this does come back to a few things. Probably your family of origin is one. Like I said, if this was not a space where you could actually voice your emotions and have somebody care for them, then it's quite adaptive to say, well, then I'm never actually going to show them and I better just figure it out. So it's a pretty smart coping strategy in that context. But in your everyday life, just as an individual, then you can probably feel very lonely. You might resort to using substances or things like that because you need some sort of outlet or comfort for your emotions that you're not expressing. You might be somebody who's just really people pleasing and other oriented without sort of checking in with yourself. And then I think, like you said, there's cultural norms and gender norms around it. A lot of men, I think, are just like, well, I've just been taught to keep this to myself. Who cares about emotions?
Oh, yeah.
And so unlearning that is really tough because we have decades worth of reinforcement for them, you know?
Yeah, reinforcement and social reinforcement as well.
Yes, exactly.
I definitely think that as men, you've got to have this skill. Oh, maybe it's not a skill, and this is again bro science. I haven't seen anything around this, but this idea of until you're in a secure relationship, you kind of just need to keep your shit behind a wall.
Yeah.
Like you've got to present that you are in control and that you have just your shit together. I don't think that ladies are looking for I don't believe that this stuff that we see out there that people are like, oh, he's got to be earning like high six figures, this, that. But I do think that it is attractive if someone just has their shit together.
Yeah.
And I think the brutal truth of it is that you have to keep it all inside, show that you've got your shit together, and also have your shit together, like actually. But then when you get into a relationship, you also then need to learn this new skill.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
Which is like, hey, after the honeymoon phase is over, it is actually very important now to let down some of these walls that you've just spent the last 33 years building.
Oh, totally. And I have a question for you, but it might be personal. So if you don't want to answer it, then you don't.
I love
it.
Let's go.
I'm curious about, so you were saying that in your last relationship, it was a situation where you kind of feel like you missed the signs.
Oh, yeah.
And then you were like, oh shit, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And it sounds like now that didn't happen.
Yeah.
What was the shift that caused you to go from that to this?
I think I think about this so much, and I wonder about this, and I truly don't know, but I think it is. In fact, this is what I think it is. I think it is just a million tiny moments that, like, little bits of paper. One sheet of paper is really weak, two are really weak. But if you put a million sheets of paper, it's like a brick, right? It's completely solid. And I think with my relationship now, we just have a million small moments of relying on each other and looking out for each other and being the best that we can be. that it feels really, really, really strong, and we feel really safe in it. And because of that safety, it means that we can have a little bit more like fun. We can be even more playful, and that makes it happier. And we just love hanging out together. We just have a lot of fun.
Totally.
And I think in my former relationship, we were both very much so both going in different directions, and we were like full steam ahead on our own ships in our own directions.
Right.
And so our lives didn't feel as enmeshed. And even now, me and my partner do very different things. Like we still have our own separate lives, but it feels like we're definitely on the same ship.
Yeah, nice. That's interesting. Yeah, because I'm just thinking to myself, like for you to go from a relationship where you felt like you weren't really as responsive to making an app that's all about responsiveness. That's very cool. But I'm like, what happened there? You know? That's really neat.
Yeah, I mean, and I just loved, I think when I was reading some of those first books, I just remember reading like Sue Johnson's book and being like, oh my God. Like you sort of like wish that you could go back in time and do things properly just for the sake of the other person or just for the sake of yourself. But then you think, well, actually, like my life is amazing now, and so then I wouldn't have the awesome life that I do, and I feel really, really happy. But you definitely think, okay, there's probably someone out there that's going through exactly the same thing that I can maybe give a hand to.
Yeah, totally.
And we've had, I think, over 400,000 people use Couply, which is a lot of little hopefully helping hands.
But that's also so encouraging that 400,000 people are like, I would like to be a better partner. How heartwarming is that?
Yeah. And it's often not these, it doesn't even always need to be these like big gestures or these big hard conversations. And I think that's been such a cool takeaway from this conversation with you, is that, hey, the small things count.
Yeah.
Keep pushing forward.
Yeah.
Find ways in your day to make your relationship shine. And that's beautiful.
Yeah. And you don't need to be perfect all the time.
Oh, yeah.
But I do think that when you do those small things and those accumulate, the interesting thing is that then your partner will cut you a little more slack.
So much more slack.
Right? Because it's like, well, normally they're such a good guy. They're just going through you know what I mean? But if you're on the rocks kind of all the time, then when something does happen or you aren't as responsive, your partner is way less lenient about it.
It's become, they're now seeing proof or sneaking suspicions that they have that you're not a good person.
Right. Yeah.
Very powerful stuff. All right. Well, thank you so much. This has been an amazing, amazing conversation. Our first Couply podcast IRL.
So exciting. I'm so honored. No, it's so nice to be in person. Thank you for having me.
If you've watched this and you've enjoyed it, please subscribe, leave us a comment, and let Kristina and I know that you enjoyed the podcast. If you listened this far, Kristina, how can people find you and stay in touch?
Yes. So our website is fresh-insight.ca. That's the name of my clinic. We help individuals, couples, families of all ages of backgrounds. And then I'm on Instagram at Kristina Virro and TikTok at Therapy Kristina.
Kristina, thank you so much for being a guest.
Thank you.